You just tell me when you're ready.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brandon Marie. I'm the Director of Communications for the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. I would ask that you would mute yourselves for just a few moments as we get started here. I am joined by Commissioner Tucker and President Jackson. We have just completed our spring board meeting and have made some decisions to affect the future of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. At this point in time, I'm going to turn things over to Commissioner Tucker, who will provide a statement. We will open the floor for questions at the end of their statement. If you have a question, we encourage you to either type that into the chat or to click the raise your hand button. All right, at this time, Commissioner Tucker.
Good afternoon to everyone who has joined us. We thank you so very much for availing yourselves to be with us by being on this call or being a part of this Zoom. It indicates to us that you care about high school athletics and you are about trying to share our message. As Brandon just said, we did just conclude our spring meeting. And we made some decisions that we believe will be impactful as we move forward. And I think we have somebody who needs to mute themselves so that we don't have that feedback. So thank you for that. Again, I'm in. Okay, did you unmute? Okay, I just heard that all that I said that was so wonderful. You guys didn't hear it. And so now it seems like I have to start all over again. But just in case, thank you for being a part of this Zoom. Thank you for trying to help share the meeting, share the news about the NCHSAA. We're grateful for what you do and grateful that you took time. Perhaps you skipped lunch so that you could be with us. But anyway, we're happy about that. And let me just say, Brandon, who's just got us started, is in his second day with us as Director of Communications and Media Relations. And so we are already getting him baptized, so to speak, and we know that you will be reaching out to him and he reaching out to you as we move forward. I'm going to now turn it over to President Jackson, who will have some comments.
Good afternoon. Thank you. As our commissioners just shared, we appreciate your interest in education-based athletics in the state of North Carolina. We certainly appreciate all the work you do in telling the stories of our fabulous student athletes in our member schools who do such a great job providing opportunities to our students across the great state of North Carolina. My name is Rob Jackson. I have the opportunity and the honor of serving as the superintendent for the Buncombe County Schools in Western North Carolina, and just about to conclude my year as president of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. Certainly during our meeting during the last 2 days, we had the opportunity to thank the fabulous staff of the High School Athletic Association for all of their work during this year. We have had a wonderful year. It was certainly, I was very grateful and appreciative to see the number of fans be back in the stands, as we've had a couple of tough years based on what was going on in the world. We had some incredible state championship games, and we're very grateful for that. I'm also very grateful for our board of directors. Our board of directors represent all 8 regions of the state, all 4 classifications, our current 4 classifications. They represent superintendents, principals, athletic directors, and we have some affiliate members as well. Worked hard over the course of the last 2 days to make sure that the decisions we made were in the best interest of our student athletes and the best interest of our member schools across the state. So again, thank you for the work you do and sharing the great stories of our student athletes and our member schools. And thank you for being here today. Madam Commissioner.
All right, thank you. And we'll let Brandon look and see who wants to be first.
We are open to questions. Check the chat box first. I would please ask that you would raise your hand.
So if you're not going to put anything in the chat or raise your hand, go ahead and unmute yourselves and perhaps.
There. All right. This is Eric Gullickson.
Hi, Commissioner. Obviously, the big thing to a lot of us today is the name, image, and likeness that you guys passed. Obviously, there's a lot of questions for everybody on what that overall means for kids. We've seen what it's done in college, and obviously, the question that I had was how do we kind of keep this as, the good intention that it's supposed to have to help kids rather than, what it's kind of become in college?
Well, I think one of the differences in what will happen with at the high school level versus what is happening at the college level is that everybody owns their name, their image, and their likeness. And so what our board did in passing this bill or passing this rule is to try to give some structure, to try to give some parameters to our athletic directors, as well as to families and the student athletes. Here are the things that you can do. We know that you own your name, your image, and likeness. And if you want to go out or someone reaches out to you because of your name, that's fine. But you cannot represent your school. You cannot wear your jersey. You cannot use the NCHSAA logo. So those kinds of, I'll say, prohibitions, I think moves us into a different arena than at the college level. We don't believe that we have that many student athletes, and this has been what I've learned from my colleagues across the country, is that it is your very elite athletes oftentimes who find themselves in those positions, but it's not necessarily limited to them. It could be someone who is just really, really good at whatever, and a fitness center wants to utilize that student's talent, and they can do that, again, provided they're not using the school name, the school jersey, equipment, etc. And so the bill, I believe, is designed to try to give that structure as we move forward, because this is a very fast-changing landscape. The NCAA obviously is continuing to try to figure out what they're going to do, but we certainly are not looking for this to be something that booster clubs or someone else would try to turn into some type of a recruiting tool that obviously you all hear that is happening at the college level. That's certainly not where we're trying to go, and that certainly would be not allowed in our rules and regulations. So over the next several weeks and leading into the summer, we'll be trying to put together some FAQs.
Oh, North Carolina High School Athletic Association is having their meeting after approving this NIL deal.
Okay. So as we move into the summer, we will try to make sure that we give some information to our school staffs and then try to provide something on our website, the student and parent page that they will be able to utilize. So education is going to be key. Remember, our students are still amateurs. And if they want to remain an amateur, then obviously following the guidelines that we will be providing will be key to that.
I believe there was a question that came in through the chat. Q, have you spoken to any legislators about Senate Bill 636 or the charter school bill? It looks like both are being voted on today. And that comes from the Charlotte Observer.
Okay, Langston, thank you for that question. If you're asking, have any of the writers of the Senate Bill 636 reached out to me, the answer to that is no. We did have an opportunity to go to the Education Committee hearing on Monday afternoon. President Jackson, Vice President Blanton were there, and they actually were able to speak the 2 minutes. So however much they could get in 2 minutes, they did speak. And of course, you know, the questions that we have are probably the questions you have, and that is, how did we arrive at this point? Because we have not reached that 1 year benchmark of having gone through the MOU. So we are like you guys right now, we're bystanders. We have folks who are liaisons at the General Assembly are speaking for us. We know that it's probably going to cross over to the House, and we hope that we will have more opportunities to speak at that time.
We'll go ahead and recognize Nick Stevens. I see you have your hand raised.
Hey, Q. There have been a lot of, I guess, questions raised on social media around NIL and, you know, how can the NCHSAA ensure that the regulations and the guidelines that you've put in place are not abused? And if they are, if the rules and regulations are broken, I know there's a 60-day penalty for eligibility for the athletes, but what would the penalty be for a school or a coach who may go and do something that's not within the bounds of it? Is that covered in the penalties that exist today?
Well, first thing I would say, Nick, and I'll let President Jackson respond, any member school who chooses to join the NCHSAA does so with the understanding that they're going to follow our rules and regulations. So we depend on our membership exercising our core values, honesty, integrity. And so that when we put those rules and regulations in place, that they are saying, okay, I'm a member of the NCHSAA, we're going to follow these rules and regulations. So that's the assurance we have, is that they are going to do what they have said they will do when they join this team. And then if we have folks who go rogue, so to speak, you know, that can happen not just with this policy, but that could happen with anything, Nick. And we would deal with that just like we deal with other instances where someone is in violation of our rules and regulations. I choose to go at it from the standpoint that once we're able to get all of the information out, once we have those educational opportunities, I choose to believe our coaches, our athletic directors are going to do everything they can to ensure that not only is as an individual, they're doing what they're supposed to do, but you know, the checks and balances are me as the coach at Reedsville High School, seeing that someone else is doing something wrong, reaching out to the association and asking some questions. We have that happen now with our rules and regulations. President Jackson.
Thank you. And Nick, thank you for the question. We certainly appreciate that. There were two words that were talked about often by our board as we considered the NIL policy. And even prior to that, as we had a committee working on this to bring a policy forward for the board's consideration, those two words were opportunity and training. And certainly we had a conversation around, we want to ensure our students have the opportunity to utilize their name, image, and likeness because it is theirs. And we don't want to deny a student the opportunities before them. In fact, we want to make sure they have every opportunity they possibly can as they move forward. That second piece, though, training is extremely important. And certainly that's one opportunity that the media can help us out with that in just talking about NIL as a new policy. We know that we have to train superintendents, we have to train principals, we have to train athletic directors, we have to train coaches, but we also have to train parents, because this is a new frontier for all of us. And I would encourage anyone who has a question to ask those questions, to proceed cautiously before entering into an agreement, to understand all the ramifications of that agreement, because we don't want to minimize opportunities, but we certainly want our students and our member schools to go into anything with their eyes wide open. And so the High School Athletic Association has already begun considering how we can work with our partner associations, the Coaches Association, the Athletic Directors Association, the Superintendents Association, the Principals Association, to ensure that that professional development, those training opportunities go forward as we go into the end of this school year and into the summer, so we can all make sure we're doing our very best to inform our student athletes and help them make the very best decision for themselves we possibly can.
If I could just follow up real quick on one thing, I don't know who wants to answer this one, but in the college world, we're seeing these big NIL collectives form. And Q, I know you made a comment at the end of the meeting about making sure that the haves and the have-nots don't get further apart. Am I right in understanding that the language in that would prevent those types of things from being established? There couldn't be an NIL collective at a school that has a lot of resources to make sure that everybody that plays football at whatever school gets X amount of money.
Well, Nick, as you know, we have always had a rule or policy that says undue influence is not allowed. And so if we start to see collectives and those kinds of things, that would fall under that umbrella, and we would deal with it in that manner. So we believe that the policy we have in place will help guide us so that collectives do not become problematic. But as we said in the meeting, and as this was being considered, it is a changing landscape. And as Kathy Moore was presenting this, is that we must monitor this and try to make sure that everybody is following those rules. And certainly collectives is one of those areas that we will be watching very closely. And what's good about it is colleagues in other states are doing the same thing we're doing, and that is watching what's happening with collectives and just this whole NIL environment. And we share commentary all the time. So we will depend on some of their advice, some of their experiences to help guide us as we move forward.
Thank you, Nick. We'll go ahead and recognize New Bern Live. If you would identify yourself before you ask a question, please.
Yeah, sure. Eric Queen, New Bern Live. My question deals with enforcement of this. So who exactly would make a determination that a violation of this new policy occurred? Is it one person? Is it a board? And is there a due process appeal if the student and or the school disagrees with the decision that you make?
Well, Eric, again, it is the school is the member. Schools, we depend on our schools knowing those rules and regulations. And if they realize that they have done something wrong, they would notify us that, hey, we think we've messed up. Here's what we have. And then we would try to guide them through that. And as you know, we don't have a fines system in place, so we wouldn't be fining someone. So, when you talk about who will make those decisions, all decisions typically are made at the local level. That's where they start. When they realize they violated a rule, whether it is an academic rule or residence rule, whatever it is, it starts at the local level. And then they reach out to us for guidance. They reach out to us to say, we think we've messed up. And then we do have those occasional opportunities where another school reaches out and says, hey, I think this school A is violating because they are allowing this to occur. And then we do what we always do. We reach out to school A and say, hey, we received a call. How about looking into it, or let us know what you know, and let's discuss it.
So ultimately, if the school says we think it's fine, you're done?
Well, I mean, that's true in any of our rules. If the schools say that, you know, a student is eligible and they move forward with that eligibility rule, we don't go digging for, violations. Again, we depend on our member schools to tell us when they have violated. That's why, as President Jackson just said, the education piece relative to NIL is going to be very, very important. And we will do that as a staff to try to help our ADs. And in fact, our ADs were at the AD conference back at the end of March. They had a session and started this whole discussion. And so they are aware that this is, now they know it's out here. And so they will be keenly waiting to see how we move forward and how we can assist one another.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, because you're saying that it goes down to the local school, but let's say one of the local high schools looked at a situation. They said, you know what, we don't think this student's violating your NIL policies, but you think they are. What happens when there's that conflict of the local school saying, nope, it's good, and you guys are saying, no, it's bad? Who's the arbitrator of that?
Thank you for the question. If I may,
The arbiter, not arbitrator.
if I may help to, or may jump in just a moment. So anytime that there's a potential rule violation, certainly we depend on our member schools to self-report, and that's typically what happens. If there is a report from one school about another school, the association would investigate that, and ultimately a decision would be made by our commissioner. Earlier, you asked about an appeals process. There is an appeals process. There's always been an appeals process. That has changed under the MOU. This is our first year. We haven't completed a first year, but this is our first year under that MOU, and that appeals process actually flows to an independent appeals commission that's appointed by the State Board of Education. And so if there were a decision made by the association that a member school wanted to appeal, they have the opportunity to appeal that decision, whether it's NIL or any other potential rule violation, to that independent appeals commission that's appointed by the State Board of Education.
Thank you.
I believe there was another question in the chat. Andy Reinhardt from Polk Sports. With the approval of the member proposal around classifications, can you clarify what the next steps will be in terms of guidelines around conferences and playoffs?
Okay, thank you for that question, Andy. We talked about there are some questions, some decisions that our board of directors will need to make moving forward. So I'm going to let President Jackson kind of talk about our next steps and the committee that will be working on some of these processes.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. Actually, I'm quite excited about that and really excited about the process. Our member schools recognize that there may be a better way for the association to classify schools in terms of fair play and moving forward into the state playoffs. They submitted an amendment to our bylaw, which has to be voted on by the member schools because we are a member-driven organization. And many folks reached out to make sure our high school principals, the constituted voting members of our member schools, cast a vote one way or the other. So I'm very excited about the process, about the numbers who cast a vote. Going forward, as we change from 4 classifications to what looks like will be 7 classifications, there are a lot of logistical questions that have to be answered. And so I appointed a committee of board members and asked the High School Athletic Association staff, our commissioners staff, to appoint outside persons who would be able to help guide that work to begin to answer questions or provide guidance to the answer of those questions, like conference setup, the way we're going to go forward into playoffs prior to our realignment, when we actually look at our numbers to begin the realignment process in terms of how we're going to classify schools. We know that we're limited in the classification, but as our staff pointed out, we could start the classification from top down, largest to smallest, or bottom up, smallest to largest, or start in the middle and simply have even numbers of classifications, which leaves a little growth opportunity in case we have member schools during the course of a realignment. So lots of logistical questions exist as we're just beginning this journey. And so to begin that work, we have appointed a committee of board members, and then I've asked the staff to appoint other outside folks who have expertise who can help inform that work so that we're able to move forward in as smooth a way as possible as we make what is a large change for our association. But again, I love the change simply because it came from our member schools across the state. It was voted on by our member schools across the state, and it is the perfect example of what being a member-driven organization where local schools in local communities across our state are making the decision that's best for them locally, as opposed to making a decision at one central location and then pushing that across the state. That's perhaps the strength of this organization.
I see there's a couple of you with your hands raised, the iPhone user.
Langston? Is that Langston with the iPhone? Well,
If not,
Nick?
The charter school omnibus bill that got amended yesterday, it would obviously have some impacts on potentially how schools are aligned next year, but definitely with the 7 classifications coming down the road, we're working on like kind of modeling out what that could look like, and like, for example, in the 7A West, you would have a 3,700 school playing against teams with 400 students in it. Can either one of you kind of talk about what that impact would be on the NCHSAA and the schools that would be impacted by that?
Well, I tell you, Nick, it's really kind of early to begin to look at the impact. We're certainly watching it and monitoring it and paying attention. But the reason I mentioned that it may be early is that, as you know, there have been a couple of bills introduced this session that address classification. The charter school omnibus is the latest. And so as those bills move forward, not knowing which bill might actually make it and become part of statute, we monitor those. But at this point, it's hard to say we know that the impact is going to be whatever it might be, because there's so many things that are coming forward. As recently as Monday, our commissioner mentioned that Vice President Blanton and myself were at the Senate Education Committee meeting to speak to that bill. And that bill, as we walked in the room, had in it that we would return to 4 classifications. And that was changed by a process of amendment by the committee as we were arriving. And so there's several things that we're monitoring, and we continue to monitor that. But that inclusion in the charter school omnibus bill about how specifically charter schools would be classified was something that I don't want to speak for the association staff, but it was a bit surprising to me because I didn't necessarily see that coming. And so we're monitoring that and preparing for, if it goes forward, what that might mean. But again, it's, as all things happening in the General Assembly, it's important that we all pay attention, because it could be a big change for our member schools and for our association. So I apologize, I don't have better information for you specifically to that, but we are monitoring those bills as they go forward for potential implications on the member schools and our association.
And real quick, one more thing on that. One real quick, just clarification, and then one more thing on that. Number one, yesterday in the committee meeting, when this bill was amended, they specifically mentioned a school, Christ the King, and said that they were a private boarding school and were taking in students from all over the world to compete against 1A traditional schools. My understanding is that would not be allowed in the NCHSAA for a boarding school. Can you just clarify the rules on that for us, Q?
Well, it's very clear in our bylaws, Nick. We say that the NCHSAA is made up of public high schools and non-boarding parochial schools. So we don't have any schools that are boarding schools. When Christ the King, as you mentioned them, when they membership, it was with the understanding that they were not a boarding school. So we do not believe that they are a boarding school. There hasn't been any report by any other member school that Christ the King is a boarding school. And I believe that if that were the case, we would have heard it some other way if Christ the King were not going to tell us themselves. So I believe that is incorrect information.
Do you worry that if we move schools with a few hundred students into a classification with schools with over 3,000 students, that we may see athletic opportunities at those smaller schools go away?
Well, I think always the board of directors of the NCHSAA, when you go all the way back to its founding, it was always with the idea that every school, regardless of the size, would have an equal opportunity, which is why we now have classifications so that schools would have those opportunities. And for all these many years, we've had the 4 classes. And so, that has been a growing concern, that the size of a school, it dictated whether or not they could be successful. And so now with the passage of the amendment to bylaw 6, that helps in that we will have more classifications. So if you're asking, would I be worried if this bill did something opposite from what has been kind of the premise by which the NCHSAA has operated, then absolutely. But I think, as President Jackson said, it is premature for us to really worry about something that has not materialized yet. So we're taking that wait and see stance. And once it happens, then we'll drop back and punt. We'll adjust our sails. We'll do whatever we need to do, depending on what ultimately is passed and what ultimately the governor signs or is vetoed, whatever is the case.
Hey, Q, I got my microphone working now. That was kind of my question when he was just asking about the charter schools. And was there any concern about a charter school potentially having to play a 6A or 7A school down the road? But you answered my question, so thank you.
Okay, very good, Langston. Get that microphone fixed, man.
I just didn't have a setting on. I'm good.
You need me to give you some
yes, ma'am, I do.
All right.
All right, we did just have another question in the chat there. What were the conversations, this is from Rod Baxley, around the shift to the Final Four format in the basketball playoffs, and what are your thoughts on the change?
Well, let me first of all say, being a former basketball coach at the high school level, and then being having the opportunity to accompany NC State when they participated in the women's Final Four, when Coach Yao was still at the helm, a Final Four atmosphere is wonderful. Obviously, at the collegiate level, it is wonderful. The conversation around those playoffs really had to do with a number of things. One, our basketball coaches have long wanted a Final Four format of sorts. And so, we've talked about it with them for years. And then as we have progressed over the last several years to the increase in attendance at our regional championships, as well as our state championships, we recognize that facilities across the state being able to accommodate those regional championship games, it was difficult to find them. We know that we could play. We had some opportunities in the East in terms of some facilities, but then when you move to the West, some of those facilities are not as large, especially at the college level, are not as large as a couple of our high schools. And so this year in particular, we had large crowds at our finals. Our regional finals. You guys are keenly aware of that. And then, of course, we had a tremendous outpouring of spectators at our state championships. So it just became an opportunity for us as a staff to start a more intense investigation of this idea, because we knew we couldn't have another basketball season and have folks not being able to get into those regional finals and having those lines of folks who are standing outside just praying that they could get in. So we started looking at our sister states, meaning those states in Section 3, which we are a member of based on the way the NFHS divides us up. Rhonda Drivers in our office reached out, got copies of what they have done for years. And it has been this format of playing all of the regional and state championships at a single site, boys and girls, which means, of course, that we have to start earlier in the week. It means, of course, that we will have to play earlier in the day. And so when we floated that idea to our Basketball Coaches Association last week, when they were in the office a couple of weeks ago, they were excited about the prospect. And then, of course, as it was shared with our board, they too recognized that we needed to do something. And I used to work with a guy who said, you have to do something, even if it's wrong. So for us, this is an opportunity for us to create an atmosphere that could be really outstanding, bringing boys and girls, all classifications into the same venue, and really making it something special. So we look forward to it. There are a lot of details that are yet to be worked out. We don't know that site yet, so nobody asked me. We don't know. What we do know is that first and second week, we would play 2 games in those weeks. And then the final 4 week, we would obviously have the regional finals as we have known them, and then the state finals. So we're trying to work through all of that, trying to find a site. We'll be looking, and once we get some of those, we will share that information with our board, with our basketball coaches, and obviously you guys will be on the list.
Are there any other questions that we could field at this time? I don't see any hands raised.
Can I ask one more about basketball?
Yes, sir, Nick.
The board is creating a committee to look at the shot clock.
Yes.
Do we think that the shot clock is something that will get implemented at some point in the not too distant future? Will this be something that is revisited in December?
Well, obviously, we put together that committee. We'll have a committee to study it. And then, of course, we'll share that information with our board. Now, Nick, you know me well enough to know that I'm not going to tell you that in the immediate future. I don't know what the immediate future is, but I can tell you that in the immediate future, meaning at our next board meeting, we will report the results of the implications of the shot clock, financial implications, not just with the equipment itself, but with personnel, et cetera. We'll share that with our board of directors, and then we'll look to see where we want to go. Not every state in the country is utilizing the shot clock at the high school level. In fact, I think it's around 17 states that are using the shot clock at the high school level. So it's not like we're an outlier in that regard. Other questions?
If not, we'd like to thank you for your time this afternoon. Please stay up to date through some press releases that we'll be sending out later today regarding the events of this morning's board meeting. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you in the future. Again, my name is Brandon Marie. That's Brandon at NCHSAA.org. Feel free to email me. All right. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, guys. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.